For those of you who follow my YouTube channel, you will know that I have a real passion and fetish for numbered bike, rare bikes, and bikes that tell a story. Now, this particular bike here behind me actually belongs to me. It's part of the Route 21 collection, and it is an iconic bike. It is a 1992 Honda CBR900RR Fireblade, the launch model 1992, and it's iconic because it was a complete game changer. Back in the day, it's the first time they stuck a liter engine into a 600 chassis, and the Honda Fireblade became one of the most beloved models around, and 30 years later, uninterrupted production run, and in 2022 they've even made a 30th anniversary bike paying homage to this bike with the same graphics, with a modern spin, that brushstroke design in white, red and blue. Now in this episode I want to talk about what made this 1992 Honda CBR900RR such a game changer. As mentioned in the intro, this is a 1992, the launch bike CBR900RR of Honda, also known the model as the Fireblade. Now, if I take you back a little bit, 1988 World Superbike started as we know it today, and through the late 80s, the entire 90s and into the early 2000s, the capacity restrictions were inline 4 cylinders with 750 cc's against 1000cc twins. Now, Kawasaki had like the ZX R750, and Honda raced with the famous RC30 and RC45, which were all 750 cc's. So you can appreciate that superbikes were really classified 750 cc's, the top of the range, and anything bigger than that, the thousands, were really sport bike and sport touring bike, not superbikes as we know it. So then in the early 2000s, Ducatis with their twins were allowed to go up to 1200s, and the inline 4s were allowed to go to the 1000 cc's. But that was in the early 2000s. Now a decade before, in 1992, Honda was bold enough to stick what they called back then a liter capacity engine, which was actually just under 900cc, into a 600 chassis. Yes, a 600 chassis, because this bike for its day was really diminutive. It's actually in all sizes, length, width and height, smaller than today 2022 and 23's Fireblade. It's still smaller today. So really a diminutive bike, and even with this 900cc motor, it was only 1.8 kilograms heavier than the CBR600 F2 of the same day, 1992. So you're getting monstrous more capacity, horsepower, for only 1.8 kilos weight, additional weight. So fantastic and game changer, ahead of its time. I mean, the closest 1000cc Yamaha opposition was a massive 34 kilograms heavier than this bike, and in dimensions overall it was a bus compared to this tiny diminutive Fireblade. Now, just to put that in perspective for you, I mean, if we talk the Fireblade today, the opposition would be the Yamaha R1 or the Suzuki GSX-R or the Kawasaki ZX9 and ZX10Rs of today. But I mean, the Honda Fireblade 900 came out in 1992. The R1 only came out in 1998. And the Kawasaki Ninja ZX9R came out in 94, so 2 years after this blade, when everyone reacted. Now, as I mentioned just now, the CBR900RR came out in 92. The YZF1000R Thunder Ace of 96 to 2005 was sort of an opposition, did not have the horsepower of this bike, and was a monstrous 30 plus kilos heavier than this. So as you can see, game changer when it came to power versus weight versus chassis and handling. This set a new benchmark, and that's why I say this is an iconic bike, game-changing bike, liter capacity bike as we know it today. It came in 6 generations, which I'll go through in the 900 category, and then later from 2004 became known as the CBR1000. But in the 900 had 6 generations, which I'll go through in more detail. But first, let's have a look at the specs of this 1992 bike. Starting with the bike, model known as either a Fireblade or a CBR900RR of 92. 4-stroke double overhead cam, transverse 4-cylinder, 4 valves per cylinder. Exact cc was 893cc, liquid cooled, wet sump. Exhaust was 4 header pipes into 2 into 1. That's an aftermarket exhaust, oval. It was a black round pipe, which I'm still looking for to make it original. The important thing here is to note that this motor was still carburetor, not fuel injection. It had 4x38 mils carburation. The max power of this motor was 86 kilowatts, which is 117 horsepower at 10,500 RPMs, 88 newton meters at 10,000 RPM. Now, clutch was wet multi-disc, cable operated, 6-speed final drive chain. The frame was this box aluminium twin spar, very much as technology is today on these. The dry weight was a magnificent, magical 185 kilogram, which is unheard of back in the day. Only 205 or 206 kilos wet weight. So power to weight ratio, phenomenal for the day. You're talking 117 horsepower with a wet weight of 205 kilograms. Now, if you're talking suspension, this was not the upside down suspension, it was the traditional suspension, 45 mil showers with a travel of 120 mil. At the rear, a twin swing arm, not like the Ducati of the 94, and shower monoshock travel 120 mil as well. The front disc, twin rotors of 296 millimeters, double calipers of 4 piston Nissans, and 1 single disc at the back, 220 mil in diameter, with a single piston caliper Nissan as well. Wheels and tires. Now, interestingly, back in the day, this front wheel was a 16-inch, not 17 as we know it today, and a chunky 130. So 16-inch shod with a 130. The back, very traditional 17-inch 180 as we know it today. The overall dimension on this bike in all directions, length, width and height, is still smaller than the 2022 and 23 Fireblade. You're talking 2055 millimeters in length. The width is 685 millimeters and the height is 1110 millimeters. So all round smaller than the current Fireblade. The seat height also lower than today's Fireblade at 810 millimeters. I'll do another episode where I will compare today's Fireblade with this Fireblade. But the fuel capacity on this monstrous tank, have a look at this from the top, was an absolute monster for the day at 18 liters capacity, and the fuel consumption of this bike was around about the 6.4 liters per 100. The standing mile on this baby was 10.3 seconds with a 211.5 kilometers per hour speed reached. The top speed was rated at 264 kilometers per hour, which is 164 mile an hour. And the colors available for 1992 for the launch year was this iconic, what they call the brush stroke, and there was a blue, white and red, and this was the purple, white and sort of pinkish red. So that changed. I don't know if it was country dependent or whatever, but it was the 92 launch colors and very iconic, and that's why I had to have this in my collection. The only other color available for 92 was the very stealthy black look. So now, as I mentioned earlier, there were 6 generations in the 900 category before it became a CBR1000 in 2004. Now you're talking a CBR900RR became a 919RR, a 9299RR and a 954RR. But to go through them in more detail, it was, as mentioned, first introduced in 92, first generation, as an 893cc, known as a CBR900RR, and it set a new precedent for lightweight superbike class, much lighter than anything available on the class. And Honda actually based it on the advanced research stage model, which they had a CBR750RR. And what they did is just increased the bore on the motor to increase it to an 893cc. And the dry weight was only 185 kilograms, wet weight 205 kilograms, and as I mentioned earlier, one 85 kilograms, was only 1.8 kilograms heavier than their CBR600 F2. And the wheelbase was identical to their test bed, that research model of the CBR750RR. And as I mentioned as well, the next lightest over 750cc machine was the Yamaha FZR1000, which was a massive 34 kilos heavier than this bike and much bigger. So then came changes for 94, and there was improvement on the gearbox, which was a notchy gearbox. But known as the second generation from 95 onwards, it was upgrades on the front forks. The cylinder heads of this motor were changed from aluminium to magnesium. The styling became more aggressive, and they lost this independent front headlight, which I think is very iconic, and it became known as the Fox Eyes, a joint light. But what they did is improved aerodynamics for flow, and they had fewer of the what they call the speed holes. These holes over here got nicknamed speed holes down there, and from 95 had fewer of these speed holes. Now, the third generation started in 96, and that was known as the CBR900RR. So 96 to 97, third generation. And the major changes were rigidity on the swing arm and frame, the suspension internals were changed, and obviously the engine size. For the fourth generation of 98 and 99, the chassis got even stiffer, more like this particular one. The discs got increased in size. The front disc got new caliper, better braking. The ergonomics got revised, higher foot pegs, so you got more lean angle for cornering, and 80% of the internals were changed, and that was done for friction and weight. Also got a bigger radiator for 98 and 99. Then enter the 2000s. That is the fifth generation, and to me, the biggest change, known as the CBR900RR for 2000 and 2001. And that was a completely new engine, 929 cc's, more over square and lighter internals, fuel injection, titanium exhaust, larger discs, 330mm as we have them today. The front forks went upside down as we have them today, and the front wheel went from 16 to 17 inch. And that's why I say from 2000, the CBR929RR, or affectionately known as the CBR900, really became more of what we know today. So just to recap, 16-inch front wheel went 17-inch. The front forks went from the old school to the upside down as we have them today. And the front discs are 330mm as we have them today. So it really got much closer to where it is. And also the carburetors were lost, and it became a fuel injection motor. So then, sixth generation, final generation of the 900 era was the CBR954RR 2002 to 2003. And cylinder bore increased from 74 to 75, capacity 954cc, restyled bodywork, sleeker look again, and basic changes, foot pegs raised, better lean angle. And here you had magnificent, the dry weight was reduced to 168 kilograms already back in 2002. Now you had a power at 136 horsepower, which is 101 kilowatts, so over the 100 kilowatt mark, 96 newton meter torque, and 168 kilogram dry weight. Magnificent story, the evolution of the CBR900RR 6th generation. And just for interest's sake, an interesting topic, John McGuinness won the Macau Grand Prix in 2001 on the CBR954RR, the last of the 900 era. And then from 2004, it became known as it is today, the CBR1000RR. So as you can see, the story is fantastic. It's iconic because Honda were bold and really reinvented superbike category from 750 to the liter class bike as we know it today. So this was the stepping stone to the 1000cc, and it was a game changer and way ahead of its time, ahead of Honda, Suzuki and everybody else. And they really forced Ducati to go from 1000 to a 1200 twin to stay with when it came to road bikes. I hope you guys enjoyed this trip down memory lane with me and the story about this very iconic, game-changing 92 Honda CBR900RR Fireblade. I mean, what a fantastic bike, and that's why I feel it needs to be in my collection, in my museum. It tells a story, and you know, today, 30 years later, we all want a liter class bike. We want a 1000 or an 1100cc bike. It has to have upside down forks and all of that. But this is where this story started. In 1992, everything changed from 750cc to the liter class bike where we are today. Guys, I promise you, once I've got my warehouse up and running and I've got more space and I can easier get to these bikes, I will put a set of new tires on, get the carburetor sorted out, and I will do a ride review and maybe take it onto the track. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember, hit that like button, give me a thumbs up, and most important of all, please guys, hit that subscribe button. Help me build the channel, and if you like, the reminder bell so you always know when I'm uploading something new.